We are here tonight to tell you a little bit more about our vision report for Six Lakes called A Community Vision for Six Lakes: Nature, Education, Preservation, and Neighborhood Connections. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists for this evening. We have Justin Farmer, who's a community organizer and a member of the Six Lakes Park Coalition Steering Committee. Justin also served as a representative on the Hamden Town Legislative Council, representing District 5, which is where Six Lakes is located. We have Elizabeth Hayes, also a longtime community organizer. She, before she got involved with Six Lakes, was also deeply involved in the cleanup of the Newhall neighborhood in the early to mid 2000s. And Elizabeth also serves on a couple of town committees. Then we also have with us Leslie Gross Weirdson, who teaches at Yale University. She's a lecturer in anthropology and African studies with a PhD in geography from Clark University, and she's currently working on a project on the legacies of gun manufacturing in urban and transnational space. And we're really grateful for Leslie's participation. She used her professional background as a social scientist to help us make sure that the survey we conducted, which you're going to hear a little bit more about, was done properly. And finally, my name is Kathy Sepiel. I'm Land Protection Manager at Save the Sound, and also, like Justin and Elizabeth, a member of the Six Lakes Park Coalition Steering Committee. And so we're going to turn it over first to Justin to give a little overview of Six Lakes.
Good afternoon or good evening at this point to everyone. Thank you for joining us. The lovely picture that you see before you is from last Wednesday when we handed Senator Looney 2,110 petitions. So thank you to everyone who signed the petition. As many of you know, the petition was to the state, encouraging them, or pushing them, nudging them on the cleanup efforts that started in 1986 and have not finished. And so we have this wonderful petition to urge our state legislators to move this process along, which they have been doing. In attendance in this picture is Jameson Folk from Senator Murphy's office, the mayor, of course, Senator Looney, who received the petitions from us, and our state rep-elects, Sweet and Winter, who were also there. It was a monumental effort of help from community members like yourselves. So thank you again for all that you've been doing and are doing on this project. This is a regional map of Six Lakes. As you can see in the red outline, that is what we consider Six Lakes. The address is 475 Putnam Avenue. As you can see, this is a large parcel of land. It's 102.5 acres. It is nestled in between the southern part of Hamden, and as you can see to the south, you have New Haven. Just a couple of interesting facts about the spatial awareness of this area. It is about 3.1 miles away from New Haven's downtown Green, which translates to about a 20-minute bike ride from downtown Green to the property, or half-hour bus ride, or 15 minutes in the car. It is 2.5 miles away from the Hamden Plaza, which is about a 7-minute car ride, 20-minute bus ride, or a half-hour walk, or my favorite, 9 minutes on the bike. And it is within a couple of miles of most of our schools. It's really central to the community already. Newhall is to the south of the area, and you have the high school to the north. This is zoomed in. We have both of these lovely maps have been provided to us, one by Laura Starr, which was the previous map that you saw, who is a consultant who worked with us to create the map and help us think of some of the questions that we were getting into as we were going through the visioning process. And this map was created by Vita Nova, who are our thought partners through the visioning process that I'll get a little bit more into and talk about. But as you can see in the purple, those are of concern, not AOC, the Congresswoman, but AOC as in areas of concern. And so there are several areas, 7 areas in the purple. Most of them are in the southern end of the property, which is closest to Newhall, which is in our opinion some of the best access to the property. The green line that you see to the left that's dotted, that's the Farmington Canal bike path. So this property is adjacent to the Farmington Canal bike path. The street over from that green line is Dixwell Avenue, our main throughway, and all the white lines that you can see inside of the property are already existing trails and paths that already exist on the property. So these are access trails, some of them are dirt roads, a lot of it is paved. And so you can see it's an extensive network already. What is Six Lakes? As I said, it's a 102-acre parcel of property. It is one of the few places in the New Haven region that is not developed with such a large parcel that could become a public space and a public amenity. It has a mature forest. There are some trees there that are at least 300, 400 years old. So very, very mature tree canopy. Um, Tons of biodiversity, great blue herrings, foxes, wood ducks. My favorite, if you have not had the chance to watch the video that's on our website, there is a beautiful creature called a skeever, which is like a rat slash uh, uh, otter type creature that swims along. It is in the video. Go and enjoy it. Uh, but it is a very beautiful, beautiful space. Um, the history of the property, as many of you already know, it was used to store gunpowder back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was used for that process throughout the 60s, 1960s. The property was originally owned by Winchester, purchased by Olin in the 1930s, and now the property has been in the ownership of Olin. They, since 1986, have been on the hook for a consent decree to clean up the property. And as you know, we are here because we would love to see this become something accessible to the public, amenity to the public. And so, what is Six Lakes is a question of not only history, depending on who you talk to, but what is Six Lakes is really a question of what do we want to see, what do we hope, what do we dream, what do we envision. So during our visioning process this summer, we had 4 visioning sessions um, in the community. One down at the Keefe Center in Southern Hamden, one at the Miller Library for the general community. We had one at Whitney Cultural Commons to really bring our Whitneyville community members, one of the neighborhoods that's closest to the property, together. And then we had an amazing session uh, heralded by our great leader, Joe Bloomberg, uh, to have our residents and leaders from Whitney Center be in community and talk about the property. Um, we had over 462 participants take the survey. We rolled out the survey a little bit before last July, and we had 91 participants take uh, the the survey through the visioning sessions that we had. And then we went out to farmers markets, we knocked on doors.
The visioning process that the vision report reflects. The vision report reflects both of those pieces that Justin just talked about, but I want to focus for a couple of minutes on just the in-person, those 4 in-person visioning sessions that we held. And you can see some great photos from different locations where we held those workshops. What we did was we had people sit in smaller conversational groups that were facilitated by someone with one of those big pads on an easel. And we asked people, first of all, we asked them what other parks they already use, because we wanted to get a sense of the parks that that already exist, that people already use. And in fact, we have some students, Yale graduate students, currently working on a park census for us so that we can get a sense of how a park at Six Lakes might fit into the larger ecosystem that we already have in terms of parks. So we asked that question, and then most of the rest of the conversation at these in-person sessions was about people's dreams for the property and also their concerns. And what we did was we took all of those notes off those easels, transcribed them literally. So we do have a full document of every comment that was recorded in all 4 of those visioning sessions. But what I'm going to share with you right now is a summary of those comments that kind of distills things into the most commonly mentioned topics. So key workshop takeaways. First of all, the major themes. The first one was walking and passive recreation. This was the most commonly mentioned desire for this property. The idea of walking in a relatively undisturbed natural area, and just in general, an area in which to experience the natural environment. And second only to that was some ideas about education and using the property for educational purposes. So some specific ideas that came up included school field trips, after-school programs, programs for adults, a nature center or discovery museum, and research by university students. Topics that would be covered in education at a future park included water quality, the history of the site, wildlife on the site, ecological habitats, and general STEM education. And also people were really interested in teaching others about the history of the property. And then they raised a bunch of ideas related to that concept of education, including signage, talks, and actually repurposing the bunkers that used to hold the gunpowder, the remains of those bunkers. Some of them are still on the property, and the idea of repurposing those by incorporating them somehow into the park design as a historical feature. People also talked a lot in these sessions about connectivity. They talked about ways in which a park at Six Lakes could provide some physical connections in their neighborhoods. So obviously to the Farmington Canal Rail Trail, which Justin mentioned a few moments ago, but also as a through route to get, to use it as a pass through to get more easily from one space to another. For example, for folks who live at Whitney Center on one side, to be able to get over to the bike path easily. People talked about it as a green space they could access easily by foot or by bike. And they saw it as a potential neighborhood destination. Somebody called it our own Central Park in Southern Hamden, and a chance to create something special in Hamden for Hamden. That's another direct quote from someone at one of the sessions. And then related to that idea of connectivity, people talked about a pavilion or another structure of some kind for community and family gatherings. They imagined uses including informal gatherings, weddings, conferences, community programs. Some people even saw this as a potential source of revenue. And words like multi-generational and family-friendly and kid-friendly came up as well. So those are some ideas about how people saw the park as facilitating connectivity in the neighborhoods. The topic of business also came up. And a lot of groups discussed opportunities for mixed commercial/recreational use of the property, with the idea that the southernmost polluted portion of the property that Justin pointed out, the fact that that's zoned for commercial use already. However, there was very little consensus within these comments about business, as opposed to the top 3 bullet points on this list of major themes, where people were very much in sync with one another. People had very different ideas. They listed business opportunities as both a concern and they had some excitement about them. So that's something that we're going to have to explore a little bit more closely. And people did seem more comfortable talking about business in terms of commercial uses adjacent to the park. So, for example, on the other side of the bike path versus actually on the park property itself. And I'm saying the park, but obviously that's aspirational. And finally, the topic of water was a major theme. So people brought up ideas like, can we swim? Can we fish? Those ideas, again, there were very mixed reviews about that because there is some concern about water quality and how to either restore it or preserve it. We're waiting for some more information about that from testing results. And so we'll have to see. Obviously, there could be restrictions placed on the water. Kayaking and boating were also mentioned. So water, both as a recreational opportunity and also as a part of the ecosystem that needs to be protected and restored, came up over and over again in these conversations. There were also discussions of greatest concerns because we wanted to really know what people were concerned about. And so I've listed the top 5 concerns that came up as well. In terms of parking, people were, throwing out suggestions about where would be appropriate locations for parking, and also the potential overuse of Six Lakes if there was too much parking. The ability of local residents to walk or bike to Six Lakes was actually seen as a great benefit, that you don't need a car to get there. At least a lot of people wouldn't. Safety, that was a topic that was raised both in terms of personal safety, but also in terms of being able to safely cross traffic to access the park, the safety of walkers on trails if they were shared with cyclists, water safety, fencing, control of access points. So those are some of the kinds of topics that came up under that category. And then, of course, people were concerned about care and maintenance of the park, who would take care of it, who would manage it. Managing the problems of dumping and littering, managing water quality. So we'll just say that this is obviously a major topic that the Six Lakes Park Coalition is working on, and will continue to work on seriously as this process moves forward. Residents of Whitney Center in particular were concerned about maintaining the serenity and the privacy of the property that's located directly behind their building. And people in other neighborhoods also brought up some noise and disturbances concerns, especially related to dirt bikes and ATVs. So there was pretty broad consensus on the park being a quiet and peaceful space. And finally, cleanup in terms of remediation. Just obviously, folks are concerned about what a cleanup is going to entail and the need to do it to appropriate standards with transparency and community input. And of course, we're concerned about all of those things too, but we can say that while we can't share any details about that right now, we can tell you that DEEP has committed to coming for the 3rd year to give us an annual update sometime late in the spring. And so we'll be able to talk a little bit more about and ask some of those questions in a little bit more detail at that point. And so I'm going to turn it over to Leslie to talk a little bit more about the survey.
Great, thank you. All right, so as a follow-up to the visioning sessions, and in order to get a broader swath of feedback from the communities, particularly adjacent to the park, we designed a survey which was continuing in this vein of the visioning system, of the visioning sessions, in terms of really trying to get a sense of the needs and desires of these communities around the park. So we designed a brief survey that included a little bit of information about the park and sort of orientation about the purpose of the survey, and then just 10 questions on park usage, people's desire, how they would access or they could imagine accessing the park, and left space also for people to have some open-ended feedback so that we could make sure that we got the full range of perspectives and opinions and desires that people had. And then we also followed up in the survey with some demographic information, which will be relevant when we discuss the survey results in a minute. So I think originally we had aimed at 200 people. We ended up getting about 400, over 400, and we were really targeting the Whitneyville, Newhall, and surrounding neighborhoods, including in order to get at one, people who are potential park users, and two, to try to tap into the needs and desires of folks who have potentially been impacted by Olin and Winchester pollution in this space and in the neighborhoods around it. Ideally, these respondents for the survey would have been proportionally representative of the neighborhoods by race, age, gender, and income. But we realized, of course, that like we're just going to have to get access to the people that we can get access to. So Justin already talked a little bit about this, but I'll go over recruitment and how we were able to get people. We designed this tool through Qualtrics, which is an online survey tool, and also made paper copies available. Particularly, there were some, I think, that circulated at the visioning sessions, and then also I think were distributed at Eli at Whitney Center. So yeah, so links and the surveys were distributed at visioning sessions. They were also in the Six Lakes monthly email, Save the Sound emails, social media. There were some places where information about the survey and the QR codes to take it were posted, such as the libraries. And then Justin and Kathy and I think some other folks did in-person recruitment at farmers markets and town events and even some door-to-door to try to make sure we got as many respondents as possible. And the survey was pretty much also 2 months during the summer. So from the beginning of July until the end of August. So in terms of the outcomes of the survey, which I think is the next slide. Yeah. So we got 462 responses, including around 50 paper responses that were added into that data. And we looked at these responses qualitatively or descriptively. So we were really interested in, kind of understanding the responses in terms of frequency. So how many people responded, preferred walking, as Kathy was talking about in the visioning session, as their primary activity that they would do at the park, or what sorts of access do people list, and so on. So we did not statistically weight it, which would have been a whole other process and would have required census data and a lot more tools as well. But we were really able to get a good sense of people's desires, and they were pretty clear, as you'll see in a minute when we talk more about results, and to break these out by demographic factors. So we asked about race and ethnicity, age, family income, number of people in the family. I think those are the main things that we broke it down by. And then we looked at these responses both globally. So for example, what's the most common way that people would access the park? What is the least common way that people would access the park? And then also broke it out by demographic features. So what's the most common way that people would access the park by race, right? Or by their income, et cetera. And what we found in general is, regardless of which demographic category or group that we looked at, we were able to really see continuity over time. So even though, as you'll see, people 65 and older, this breaks out the question about activities. So what activities would you like to do at Six Lake? You can choose many of those. You don't only have to choose one. But if you'll notice, we had far more respondents that were 65 and older. But across all of the responses for all of the age groups, we had similar rankings. So more responses for hiking or walking, for example, than for playing outdoor sports. And that was consistent, not just across age, but across income, across race, across family size, and so on. Just a few more notes about the survey in terms of participation and motivation. So most people that started the survey filled it out, including the optional question at the end, which indicates that the people that took the survey were really excited and interested in this park. And again, that was proven out by the open-ended questions. People had things to say that they wanted to express. They had dreams, they had needs, they had desires. And so that was really affirming. In terms of limitations of the sample, as we might have expected, it was overrepresented in terms of white, older, and middle class respondents significantly. And some of the factors related to that had to do with the proximity of Whitney Center, the mode of outreach. Doing online surveys does reach certain communities and not others. But also I think a big factor had to do with interest in the park. So people who are already involved with Six Lakes, attending the visioning sessions, on the email list, found out and responded to the survey at a much higher rate, than across all of these neighborhoods. So that's something actually that we're thinking about in terms of potential follow-up, is ways in which we can ground truth some of the results that we found. Something I'm interested in is conducting some interviews and getting a sense from these neighborhoods about more about the way that they see this park intersecting with their needs and desires. And also maybe mapping the distribution of responses so that we can see kind of by neighborhood where these responses are falling. That's a little bit difficult because we asked for street address, but not house address, in order to preserve some anonymity and not prevent people from wanting to take the survey. So we have to figure out some of those details. But in general, I think the survey proved to be overwhelming. Like there tended to be a tremendous amount of agreement across the responses, and double the amount of respondents that we were hoping for. So overall, that's a really good sign. And I'll turn it over to Kathy to get into some of the nitty-gritty of.
Yeah, I was remiss in forgetting to mention our great thought partners for the visioning process, which was Yukon Sea Grants, as well as the town, who were instrumental in making sure that we had the ability to put together all these resources and to move along this project. So wanted to make sure to give them flowers, as they greatly deserve. Um, so there's a couple of different questions that came up that we thought would be pertinent to highlight. What type of activities would people like to see on Six Lakes? And as Leslie, alluded to, people wanted walking, hiking, bird watching, things that were, more passive recreation rather than active recreation. And so this was important. Obviously, things like biking, we didn't break out like mountain biking versus biking, but I think we get the trend that people really are in awe of this. To further that point, we asked people whether they would like to see the property fully developed or totally undeveloped. And it leaned more towards the undeveloped side. Uh, uh, Obviously, there is potentiality for development, but obviously, from the data that we got from the 400 plus respondents, people really want to enjoy the space as it is. Next slide, please. One of the big things that we ask people about is how to access the park. And so obviously, public safety is a concern for people accessing the park, being in the park. And so we had a lot of uh, discussions in those 4 sessions about, what public safety is, what it looks like. Uh, we had tons of lively conversations about, how long would the park be open in theory? What type of things would we implement blue lights? What type of things would we do to have it become safe? And so that was a big concern and something that people really were interested in. Uh, Equipment and maintaining the equipment and facilities was a big one. Um, the park is about 2 miles squared, and so it's a lot of property to cover. Um, so there were a lot of conversations about that, and then obviously making places to rest, as covering a 2 mile circumference, you know, people are going to want to sit, be able to enjoy, relax. And so those were some of the concerns that came up talking about the park. This this is something that we've had tons of conversations about how to access the park. Um, Lots of people talked about walking, biking. Um, Car was another big one, and so we've had conversations, and we continue to have conversations about what parking would look like. Do we want to encourage people to use cars to get to the park? Are there other ways that we can design or encourage for the design of the park to be in a way that allows for better public transportation to get to the park? But from respondents, most of the respondents said that they would take their car to get to the park. And so that's something that we are trying to be cognizant about and to think about and be aware of.
Six Park Coalition. We have a number of people that are a part of the Six Lakes Park Coalition and Christian Tabernacle Baptist Church, the Congregation Organization to a New Connecticut, Connecticut Land Conservation Council, the Farmington Canal Commission, the Hamden Alliance for Trees, Hamden Chamber of Commerce, the Hamden Land Conservation Trust, the Newhall Neighborhood Representatives, Save the Sound, Town of Hamden, West River Watershed Alliance, Whitneyville Civic Association Representative on Steering Committee. Next, the Six Lakes Park Coalition Action Plan. Number one is to create a working group of professionals to oversee ownership, management, and funding negotiation. The outreach to the community, the underrepresented in the visioning process, and the increased community involvement, and grow coalition membership, explore solutions to community concerns, keep stakeholders informed of progress. The Six Lakes Park Coalition urges the following timeline. This is a timeline for Olin Corporation. A comprehensive testing of the entire 102.5 acre site and planning for properties future with Olin, Deep Town, and Six Lake Park Coalition at the table. And then by the end of 2026, we would like to have a cleanup, which would begin in line with the community desired end use, funding, ownership, management plans complete. And by the end of 2028, cleanup complete, park construction begins, and new ownership / management in place. And by the end of 2029, park opens to the public with a week of festivity. We should have a week of celebration for the public to celebrate the journey of having Six Lakes as a gym where you can enjoy fresh air and tranquility.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. I am looking forward to that week of festivities. As many of y'all know, this has been an effort better part of 50 years in the making. And so, you know, we can't do this work without you. You are pivotal to this work. This project got revitalized, revamped, because community members at the time reached out to me while I was on council. And so It is through y'all's efforts that we have been moving at lightning speed, and we still continue in this new coming year, needing your help and leadership to guide us to that amazing timeline that Ms. Hayes just laid out. So if you are not part of our mailing list, please get on our mailing list. Um, please continue to come to these events and opportunities to educate yourself about Six Lakes. While the property is uh, the property does belong to Olin, um, right? No one can deny that this is obviously a public gem that needs to be used for the public good. There will be opportunities at the new coming year to door knock and canvas to talk to our community members. We definitely need to do some more of that work. Um, there are considerations around crumbling foundation in Newhall, and so we really want to reach those neighbors in Newhall and make sure that they are not only part of the process, but that they feel part of the process, which is just as important. Outreaching to our elected officials will be in the in this new year meeting with our elected officials at the state level to talk about Six Lakes, talk about opportunities to move along this property. Um, tabling opportunities will always come up. Um, and I always need help at events. Talking to people is so much fun to be in front of Stop and Shop and to go to the farmers markets and to be in community with people. It is more fun to do it with thought partners than to do it by yourself. So please, please, please uh, join us in these efforts. And lastly, um, Earth Week will be coming up before you know it. And so we're going to be hosting another perimeter cleanup. We did one about 2 months ago. We had about 50 volunteers come out, clean up around the perimeter. And we maybe filled 20, 30 trash bags worth of stuff, tons of shopping carts, industrial equipment. So we are definitely looking forward to doing that again, and definitely would love for y'all to do that. So uh, before I pass it over uh, back to Kathy, um, here's the QR code. That Gmail address goes to us. So make sure you take a picture, screenshot of that so that you can get in contact with us and to get yourself signed up and involved.